Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? My name is Colin Cunningham, and on behalf of the Davies family, I would like to welcome you and thank you for coming to this celebration of life for Cynthia. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we start. Donations in memoriam can be made to the Transplant Society. The web link is on the back of the bulletin, and the comment cards that you have, they were intended as one per family, and if you have a comment or a memory to share, please share pens, write on those cards, and drop them in the baskets on your way out. The packet of seeds is a wildflower mix, and it is the intention of the family for you to plant them somewhere to bring warmth and cheer in memory of Cynthia. Washrooms are just out that door, immediately around the corner to your left if you need them. A quick reminder to turn all phones and electronic devices off now, please. And finally, a video of the service will be made and eventually uploaded to YouTube for overseas relatives and those who couldn't make it due to weather. So if anyone wants access to that video to share with friends or relatives, please just contact a member of the family. Let me begin by saying what a privilege it is to be up here taking part in this ceremony. My family and the Davies clan have been close family friends for over 40 years. It's been such a fortunate and wonderful experience growing up together, and the acquisition of these true lifelong friends are something that myself and my family are grateful for. So it's really an honor to be here with you all today. We've all known Cynthia and the Davies family in our own slightly unique way. Whether you are a longtime friend, or if you were a young person growing up and the recipient of the Davies' warm hospitality and guidance, or perhaps you were a part of Cynthia's remarkable career in the education system, or likely, a lot of you volunteered with her or were touched in a positive way by her tireless community and church service. To be blunt, none of us are here out of boredom or obligation. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're here because Cynthia was an exceptional person. She touched many lives in a very profound way, including mine. So, we're here. We're here to admire her, to share memories, to thank her for all that she's done for us, and to say a proper goodbye. Cynthia's relatively sudden passing brought shock and dismay and regret and sorrow. But all of these fond memories of growing up on Pretty Road also came flooding back to me. My mom and I were talking about Cynthia recently, and we both remember me coming home after spending time at the Davies house, and I would be parroting Cynthia-isms. Everything she said, I seemed to internalize and accept as immediate fact, to the point it would annoy the rest of my family to no end. For example, I would hear someone ask for something without proper manners, and I would put my hands on my hips, and I would say with the proper authority, "Cynthia says that I wants gets nothing." Everyone would just roll their eyes, I'm sure. But the truth is, from the moment we met, I immediately looked up to her with awe and respect. I adored her with all the devotion a toddler could muster, and have held her in very high esteem ever since. I would like to share one of the more exciting memories that I have that involves Cynthia. It begins with an awesome Papa Wheelie in front of my house on the pothole-ridden Pretty Road in Comox. I was riding my old purple bicycle with a banana seat, and I have two very vivid images of this time. The first is of my front wheel coming completely off the forks and bouncing down the road towards the Davies house. In my mind now, it gracefully curved and went down the driveway somehow, almost as a warning that we were going to need Cynthia's help, and very soon. The second image I have is of Cynthia hovering above me, calmly taking charge of the situation while I lay screaming in pain on the kitchen table. It occurred to me what a comforting and fitting image of Cynthia this is, one which I've recalled often of late, and I wanted to share with all of you. Only now I choose to leave out the part that involves a big gauze pad filled with hydrogen peroxide as she's scraping gravel out of my chin. I brought up this memory because it demonstrates how Cynthia was always someone who was there for you, even if it's messy. She was someone you could count on through thick and thin. Nobody knows this better than her immediate family. She's been described as the rock, the glue that holds their family together through stressful times, and we know that they have had their share. So, I surveyed those closest to her recently, and I asked an almost impossible task. I asked for a word or two that they felt embodied who Cynthia really was. What came back was not at all surprising. The first two are from her grandchildren. Funny and loving. The next ones are from her sons and their partners. Selfless, devoted, joyful, integrity, generous. And it was Martin, the person who's closest of all to her, that said all of these things and more. Patient, kind, thoughtful, and above all, constant. She was all of these things just mentioned, and she embodied these qualities constantly and consistently. I remember Martin and Cynthia having many of us over as teenagers and talking to us about healthy choices and relationships. I don't remember much about the healthy choices. I'm just kidding. But I remember they both started by stating that they were each other's best friend. Now, it's one thing to say something like this, and it's an altogether different thing to live it. And speaking as someone who got to see them day in and day out for years, perhaps a little more often than they would have liked, I can say for certain that Martin and Cynthia lived it. They had a level of love and respect for each other and in their household that was palpable. They truly were the best of friends. The closeness of their family and the care they all show for one another is a tribute to the foundation of their marriage.
Jesus said, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may also be. And you know the way to where I am going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way?" Jesus said to him, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Jesus also said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." The psalmist writes, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my stronghold of my life." St. Paul says, "For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord." So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Let us pray. God of all consolation, in your unending love and mercy, you turn the darkness of death into the dawn of new life. Show compassion on your people in their sorrow. Be our refuge and our strength to lift us from the darkness of grief to the peace and light of your presence. Your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, by dying for us, conquered death, and by rising again, restored life. May we then go forward eagerly to meet him, and after our life on earth, be reunited with our brothers and sisters, where every tear shall be wiped away. We ask this through Jesus Christ the Lord. Amen.
I've been given a wonderful task to gather stories about Cynthia, mostly in her post-retirement life, and I could write a book. But I'm going to limit it to only 8 chapters. I'm going to begin with some early history. So chapter 1 is some early years. In 1970, Ryan Road was just being plowed in, and they're dropping some gravel on it, and there was one light in downtown Courtenay when I rolled into town as a lean and green new teacher, very insecure and scattered. And I met Cynthia Davies. And she was mature, calm, strong, solid, and staggeringly confident. She was an older woman in 25. And that was the Cynthia I knew forever. That's the Cynthia you know. The first morning, Friday morning at Courtenay Park School, 150 kids and teachers gathered around on the carpet, and Cynthia was the one, she was the youngest, except for me, and she led us. She led with the Lord's Prayer, and she sang song in the morning, and she helped us move forward with the day and talked about everything that was positive and wonderful about being at school in September. That's how positive Cynthia was. Within a couple years, Cynthia took maternity leave, and she birthed a very tiny, cute, beloved, blonde, baby, bouncy boy. She used to plop at Ben in the buggy and walk from 17th Street in the 40 houses all the way to Puntledge Park down the road and come and visit the kids at school. And it was the highlight of the week when Cynthia would show up with this pram. Then it was better, about 20 months later, when she had 2 bouncy baby boys and a precious little baby brother for Ben, what we called Tim. And you 2 boys, you were the best thing that ever happened to that mom of yours until Charlotte and Oliver came along. You've been usurped. Cynthia and Martin moved up to Pretty Road a couple years later. And they lived there until 3 years ago when they moved into Comox, which has been a pretty wonderful thing for them to do. And Cynthia just stayed in teaching and brought her incredible gift of counseling and love and patience and wisdom. We are going to use up this whole bag of adjectives. I can feel it today. She taught at Brooklyn, Arden, Village Park Schools, the District Board Office, and Airport School. She worked part-time when the boys were young, always wanted to be home when they got home from school. Mid-80s, decided, because everybody was saying you ought to be a counselor because you're a counselor anyway. She went to Victoria, got her master's, and came back and was a counselor for the rest of our wonderful time with her here. Everyone said she was a natural counselor, and indeed she was. Retiring at 99, in year 99, not her 99. So chapter 2 of this long book, St. Peter's. So in the late 70s and 80s, there was a huge spiritual resurgence in the valley, and St. Peter's on Church Street in Comox became the focus of the Davies spiritual, social, and community life. Dozens of young families, then we crossed over continually, babysitting each other's kids, camping together, doing retreats, Bible studies, sponsoring and supporting several refugee families, taking turns buying bulk food at Edible Island that used to be in Black Creek. And we women would split up, and one half would look after the kids and the other would go to Black Creek and buy huge bulk of flour and cheese. And kids, do you remember milk powder? They still don't like us. Then we come back and we'd split it up. Can you imagine splitting up 50 pounds of flour 3 even ways? It was quite the challenge. Then on Sundays, we'd all head down after church to the big rock at Kai Bay. We called it St. Peter's Rock. It had just a great time. The kids had a lot of fun together. And we made a commitment at that time to be a covenant community, which is being one in the bond of love and faith, caring for each other, and sharing material possessions. Every Thursday night, we'd meet at the Davies home, 30, 40, to celebrate our faith journey and singing the roof off that ample living room until it just overflowed too much and we had to move to the church hall. Then we met every Thursday night and the numbers got up to 100 and the praise could be heard for blocks. It became our village. Everyone loved and cared for everybody else's kids. And still, 40 years later, I would say that we feel ridiculously related still. Chapter 3. So Carl Jung wrote, "Life is the luminous essence between two mysteries." We all, those of us who carry babies, understand the mystery for the 9 months is spectacular. Cynthia's got the second mystery, but we're waiting. So in the middle of we're living with an essence, and Cynthia's was luminous. Carl Jung knew her. It was quite spectacular. And she spent all the time she could in her later years with her 2 precious grandkids. But when they were at school or tucked in bed at night, this is what she did with us. Over time, the kids grew, and they changed. People changed houses, churches, and towns. But 5 years ago, a number of us women from St. Peter's realized how precious that we were back then and must be now. So we started together a couple times a year for weekends away. We had a wonderful time. We called ourselves the Crones. We were in our wisdom years, and we really wanted to celebrate this new and precious time in our life where surely we were wiser. We were liberated old hags, after all, and we really enjoyed each other and appreciated what we were able to do. We planned to meet again, and it would have been next week. Chapter 4, the Ladies' Bible Study. This also rose out of the early days, the St. Peter's days, when a fairly large group of ladies from many different churches, and they've been meeting now for 20 years, but now on Wednesdays because they're all retired. They say that Cynthia's faith was like a golden thread that ran through all her life. She always wore a gold cross, which you'll see in the picture, and a gold chain, and she wore it as long as Martin remembers. Cynthia had always been a part of various Bible studies where women would study the Word of God and discuss its application to their lives. Celebrate life's bounties, of course, pray for each other, and support each other through difficult times. Cynthia had great wisdom, discernment, and discretion, and she was always trusted to hold their stories. They felt her approach to her last illness was completely consistent with her faith in her Lord. She was very rooted in her belief that she knew where she was going and that she knew that her family would be fine. She went to the Philburg Festival and bought gifts for many of her special people. And they were found by Martin, and he knew where they were to go, so they were delivered to the ladies' Bible study, and many of them are wearing them here today. Chapter 5 was the retired teachers' lunch bunch. Retired teachers really I think they miss being social. So they gathered. It started being a lunch bunch, but then it was no longer just teachers. I think I miss them. It was no longer just lunch. It also morphed into a book club, then a walking group, and a games night crowd, and dinner out, and wine sipping, and reminiscing until it was no longer just teachers, but a bunch of ladies, and even non-teachers, and new people as well. These women all describe Cynthia as gracious, grounded, comfortable with everyone. She never judged others. They loved that wonderful smile that welcomed everyone in. And as a counselor, she was incomparably competent. Professional and a born counselor, they loved her humor and her generous laugh. She never, ever complained, even when she had a sore hip. They always felt that she was their rock. They're calm in rough waters and in difficult school situations. She was consistently and loving and caring with every child that she saw, no matter who they were or how they acted to her. They loved her, and she loved them and their family, and they knew it. Even when she was diagnosed and she knew she wouldn't be around much longer, she continued to meet on Friday afternoons with these people. They felt very loved by her, and they have treasures that they gave her from the Philburg farm. Oh, and the Philburg board. This is chapter 6. Cynthia loved the Philburg grounds, and she heard of the Friends of Philburg, and when a board was formed in a more formal way in 2011, Cynthia was asked to sign on to the board, and as well as being a human resource management committee, probably on her own, and the membership committee, Cynthia was asked to be the liaison between the gift shop, who were just starting out and had some good ideas, and a board who had much passion for the place, and they had much concern for its future. Well, that little shop began in Mr. Philburg's office on the second floor of the old lodge on the property. And the idea of asking people who were moving to donate any of their prized possessions that they or their family didn't want or couldn't use was born. From that little gift shop venture only 6 years ago, when they were in the red, they've sold to date, I love this, $126,000 worth of goods. Martin, are you down about $120,000 in your grand account? Cynthia was a very faithful shopper. So Val Graham, who works with a shop, was telling me that Cynthia was absolutely a key role as a liaison officer, because she was such an impeccable listener, and she heard what they needed. They loved her very much. Well, of course, the board sponsored formal teas, and Cynthia would be the first to show up and take down, even if she was limping. She would bake, and she'd act as hostess. Of course, there's the big fundraiser of the Philburg Festival every summer, and she would always been there. Always been there. In chapter 7, and there's just this amazing St. Joseph's Hospital board. Cynthia became a board member in 2007. You see how busy she was when you were at school? It's amazing. The hospital had adopted the phrase, care with compassion, to describe how they aspired to deliver care to residents and patients. There was a sense that no one personified or acted on that phrase more clearly or dearly than Cynthia. They all knew that they could count on her to reflect and guide them in terms of what is right and ethical. So it followed that she was asked to be the chair of the ethics committee. She was also the chair of the future role committee and a valuable member of the governance committee. Typically, Cynthia never missed an opportunity to encourage or uplift someone. Often during board meetings, there were opportunities to review successful outcomes, whether patient care or administrative successes. Cynthia always recommended that the board congratulate the team, the unit, or the person responsible for the success, and it had become a standing joke that all she had to do was nod her head, and the board would know that they needed to send out a Cynthia letter. It was beautiful. Of course, things don't always go as planned or hoped for at hospital or residential care facilities, and as she was often the first to recognize success, she was also the first to feel the burden of the mistakes or tragedies and inevitable failures. She was their compass and an inspiration to them all. In chapter 8, Cynthia's book club, Pippa's book club. Cynthia belonged to this book club for the past 12 years, and of course the books she chose were always reflective of her kind and compassionate soul, but not always with happy endings, as we would like. She was always perceptive, and they were always good for discussion. At our last meeting this summer, she chose All My Puny Sorrows, which they were going to do in January, and they did it anyway, but without her. Her sensitivity, compassion, and brilliant understanding of human behavior made her an invaluable member. Her organizational skills were most appreciated. So you know when a bunch of septuagenarians get together and they want to talk about a book, and somebody remembers part of the title and the other remembers maybe the author's first name and maybe a bit of the storyline. Well, Cynthia was a very precise keeper of facts, and with a flip of a page, she would solve the problem. She'd had it all written down. And so that's the last page of this novel, and it doesn't have a very happy ending. For all of us who have been blessed to know Cynthia, who were mentored, counseled, welcomed, encouraged, hugged, or loved by, to all who walked, talked, laughed, traveled, dined, danced, worked or prayed with her, or who were sung, or read, or tucked in bed at night. You have been blessed to be in this luminous essence, and I know we all feel it today. There's just one scripture that just spoke so strongly to me, and that this was the song we sang at church this morning. And it's, "We have been blessed, O man, or we have been shown, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of thee, but to do justice, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." And I would say that we don't know anybody who did justice, loved mercy, and walked as humbly with her God as our Cynthia did. And if she was here, she'd be signing off this book today with "Love, Cynthia." Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jose, and I'm Cynthia's daughter-in-law and Ben's partner. I met Cynthia at the beginning of January 99, probably just a few weeks after I met Ben. And having Ben come into my life at 30 years old was pretty incredible, but the fact that the relationship came with the Davies parents was even more amazing. Love at first sight for Ben, but definitely love at first sight with Cynthia and Martin. A brand new family for me. Not only was I away from my own, but I had never experienced a family with so much love, respect, kindness, and care. A family so involved with each other, I was truly impressed and in love. When I was asked if I could share a few words about Cynthia, I carefully looked back on the last 18 years, making a timeline of some of the many important events that happened with Cynthia involved. I knew she was important, but this exercise really confirmed how much she meant to me personally. First, Cynthia was a counselor by trade, as we heard, but to me, she was my most important life advisor. I remember having some early challenges in my relationship with Ben, and always able to talk to Cynthia about it. She would listen and never take side. She just supported me, and I thought it was amazing. Or how many times I asked her for advice with my teaching career, or any career I was about to take on. Or how she guided me on how to deal with people and conflicts. She was so nice and gentle and understanding and always fair. She was an incredible listener, always had time to go for a walk and help me with my life. She would listen, ask a few questions, give me a few hints, and then she would agree I would be fine. And I needed that reassurance from her. Sorry. Secondly, Cynthia was a friend. She was my friend. What comes to mind is how often I said that Cynthia and Martin were like our best friends. They were. We did so many different things together, and it would always surprise people at first when we said we were doing all these things with Ben's parents. Relaxing holidays, overseas adventures, dinners, parties, helicopter ride, house demolition, hockey games, bocce tournaments, apple picking, snorkeling. You name it, she did it all. Always ready to try something new and always happy no matter what. I will always remember the day I called her to ask her if she would drive with me to Victoria to check out a pet pig. Of course she said yes. And so we went there and back and came back with a pet piggy. I will miss her company and all the great things and trips that we won't be able to take together. Third, and most importantly, Cynthia as my second mom, my role model and someone I looked up to. Some important things that came to mind. Like one day, I ended up in emergency at 7 a.m. in the morning, and when Ben asked me if he could help me or what I needed, the first thing that came to mind is, can you please get your mom? And right away, she was beside me. Or after the vet told me my Great Dane was probably had cancer, well, I found myself driving to her house, and I needed her. And again, me asking to live with them while I was recovering from my knee surgery. I didn't want to stay home. I wanted to be with them. And they took me in and took care of me like I was their own. As I said, I loved her right away. I saw how she interacted with people around her, her family, and her friends. It was beautiful to see how kind she was and how much people loved her. I definitely wanted to be like her. I'm always proud and will always be to say that Cynthia was my mother-in-law. She influenced how I grew as an individual, how I changed, and how I still try every day to be a better person. She didn't know, but like a daughter, I wanted her approval. I wanted her to be proud of me. I wanted to impress her, but I also wanted her soothing and reassuring presence in my life. There are so many memories. Looking back, it was obvious that she was more than my mother-in-law. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for accepting me, taking me into your family, and always helping me. I am a very lucky daughter-in-law. I know I can no longer just rush to her house to ask for advice and discuss what she would do. Her time in my life has changed me and made me a better person, and I thank her for that. I hope that whenever I have these moments where I wonder what she would say or do, that she will send me some clues, and I will be able to continue working on one day being like her, a very, very good person. Thank you.
I'll put it the right way. Hi, I'm Andy, Tim's wife, Cynthia's other daughter-in-law. Cynthia made me feel as a part of their family from the very beginning of my relationship with Tim. I knew of Martin and Cynthia and Ben and Tim, but to be a part of their family was incredible. I remember being so nervous going to their home for the very first family dinner, especially when she brought out a plum crumble for dessert. And that is my most despised dessert I could have ever eaten. And I wondered, how am I going to do this without being rude? And so I thought, I'll eat it. And I did. And we got through it. And we laughed about it afterwards. And I think it became a bit of a joke between the family that Cynthia would bring a plum crumble when she was coming for dinner. She supported mine and Tim's decision to move to Victoria when I was going to college, and I'm sure that that was hard. And she was especially thrilled when we moved back to Comox to get married and start a family. There was no question in either of our minds that we wanted to be close to our families at this next step in our lives. Cynthia often said how lucky she felt that we lived so close by and that she was able to see her grandkids, Charlotte and Oliver, whenever they wanted, but we were the lucky ones. I'll always be so thankful for the fantastic experiences the kids were able to have with her. Even the little things she did, like giving me a break by taking Charlotte down to Extra Foods when she was learning to walk on a rainy day and letting her walk up and down the aisles, charming all the people in the store just so I could have a break. Picking up Oliver from preschool on days that I was working, going back to their place in Butcher's, and they would play games and have lunch, with peanut butter and grandma jam on homemade bread. It was fun for them and it's helpful to me. No one will ever, ever be able to make that jam like she did. Believe me, we've tried. Cynthia was more than a mother-in-law to me. She was a friend. She was someone who was there wanting to support me in every aspect. When Tim was sick, she was my barometer. If I looked at her and she was calm, I'm like, okay, we're good. Everything's okay. If she looked worried, it was panic mode. But for the most part, she was calm. She was so good with the kids and being honest with them about everything that was going on, from when Tim was sick to her being diagnosed. She never gave them more information than she thought they could handle. And she also didn't give them too much that would worry them. She was a remarkable lady, and I know we're so thankful for all the times we've had with them, but I'm so, so sad about all the things that are coming that she will miss. So, I love Cynthia.
This could be a while.
So you're going to wear the old one out first. Okay. Well, first of all, it's just mind-boggling to see everybody here this afternoon, in spite of the weather, and I do so appreciate you all coming. It's fantastic that you've come to honor Cynthia and to listen to words about her life, and I'm sure that most of the things that have been said so far, and the things that I will probably say, you know already. I just want to start by saying that all of you who have spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, you'll probably, in the time that you've spent with them, notice that they have one particular saying, maybe a favorite, and it comes up over and over again. I have a friend, Bob, who's recently been very sick, but thankfully he's going home tomorrow. He told me that his wife used to say quite often, Bob, the sugar bowl is half empty. And Bob would think about that and wonder, now, was she just stating that the bowl's empty? Because he could see that for himself. Did she mean that he should fill the bowl? Or did she mean that she was about to fill it? So sometimes it's hard to know what's behind the words, isn't it? Now, the reason I mention that is because my lovely Cynthia
I see Roy Taylor smiling back there because he knows all about my lovely Cynthia. My lovely Cynthia had one of those sayings too. Hers was, Martin, when you have a moment, would you? And you can fill in the blanks. But unlike Bob, I knew that she wanted me to do something. But the puzzle for me was figuring out when. She knew all along that I was retired and I had all the time in the world. So I took when you have a moment to mean that she would like this job to be done as soon as possible. And so, my dear friends, now that I have a moment, I'd like to share with you some of the special qualities of Cynthia's life and our life together. You've heard Colin, you've heard Lawrence, you've heard Mary Jean, and our lovely family members speak of her life in some different ways. And so, bear with me if I overlap a little bit. Now that I have a moment, may I tell you that Cynthia and I knew each other for 62 years. She put up with me for almost 3 life sentences. We first met at age 11 and we started dating at about 17. For me, she was the only one, right away, from the start. My memories of our early romance are still vivid and exciting. I remember when I'd take her home after a date. We'd cuddle at the front porch. And then the hall light in the house would start to flick off and on. And that was the signal when, from her lovely mother Violet, that the date was over and it was time for Cynthia to go in. We would part and I would run all the way home. She made me so happy. My feet seemed to fly over the ground. Cynthia was so lovable and had so much love to give. You know, just a few days ago, I was standing at the kitchen counter preparing some spaghetti for myself, and I had some music playing in the background. It was Moon River by Andy Williams, and I had a meltdown, as it was one of the tunes I remembered being played at the first dance we went to as a young and excited couple. So I had to get away from the spaghetti sauce, or it would have been too salty even for me to eat. Each time I walk into our clothes closet, I can smell her fragrance from her clothes, and I miss her terribly. We married when she was 22 and I was 23. We taught for 2 years near London before coming to Canada, and I was privileged, and I say that with all honesty, I was privileged to share almost 51 years of marriage with her. She died Christmas Eve. We would have been 51 years, January 3rd. We had good and difficult times like all of you, I'm sure. But it was she that helped me through the rocky times with her patience and her forgiveness. She was an amazing wife. We had so many great times and so much fun together. Those great times far, far outweigh the times of trial. We traveled widely through the UK, Europe, Russia, India, China, Australia, New Zealand, and Africa. And sadly, we had intended to see our beautiful Canada in the later stages of our life. But sadly, it's not to be. Now that I have a moment, I can tell you that Cynthia was a tigress of a mother. Ben arrived in... You heard about that little blonde baby that arrived? Well, Ben arrived in 1972, and she loved him dearly. He was such a happy baby all the time and filled her life. 20 months later, Tim was due to come, and Cynthia confessed to me that she feared she wouldn't have enough love left over for him. Well, We soon found out that he filled both our hearts to bursting. And it was when Tim arrived that I saw Cynthia's true colours as a mother. She fought for Tim's life in prayer as he underwent open heart surgery at 3 weeks old, 3 years old, and again at the end of high school. She told me of the times that she would walk around Vancouver General and Children's Hospital, arguing with God, being angry with God, and finally knowing that God was all she had in those dark hours. She loved Tim, she cared for him, and nursed him through 2 heart transplant surgeries with strength, courage, and determination. All the while, she loved Ben and me too. She helped Ben in the early stages of getting his business off the ground. She and Pauline, where's Pauline? I see you. She and Pauline were able to pull back on the reins and haul him in as his fertile brain came up with new and innovative ideas to benefit his clients. And who could forget those sausage rolls that she made for the office open house each December? Cynthia had lots of love to go around. Ben and I helped where we could, but she was the rock in all those trials around Tim's health. And later, it was great to have Andy and Jose and all the others to support Tim too. Cynthia would have placed her life on the line for her 2 boys. Well, when Jose and Andy came into our lives, Cynthia gained the daughters that she'd always wanted. We had tried to adopt twins, 2 girls. We didn't care what nationality they were. We didn't care. We wanted 2 daughters to go with these 2 boys, but it never happened. And so when these 2 came along, they were the daughters that she'd always wanted. She grew close to them, as you've heard them speak. And then, when Charlotte and Oliver came along, they were like the icing on the cake. She could not get enough of them. She always wanted to see them graduate, but she's not going to make it. Now that I have a moment, let me tell you that Cynthia loved teaching. I've received so many positive cards, notes, and comments about her time as a teacher in the school system. Later in her career, she worked as a school counselor, sharing her time between various schools. She loved her job and was very good at it. Many of the teachers in here will remember one particular year. I believe it was 1992, I'm not sure. A job as the coordinator of counselling opened up at the board office. Cynthia was urged to apply for it by her peers, but she was doubtful. She prayed in earnest about the job and finally decided to step out in faith and apply for it. She got the job. Well, in that 1 year, I believe 7 school-aged children died in the district. Cynthia, with a team of marvelous counsellors, was able to get to the schools quickly, to set up counselling there, to organise tributes, and to help families deal with those difficult situations. And then, lo and behold, when the year was over, the job disappeared. And she found herself back in the schools, working with families and trying to help. I believe that our good Lord wanted her in that special job for that disastrous year. Well, now that I have a moment, may I add to Mary Jean's comments about Cynthia's involvement in the community. She really loved this community and was always so glad to have lived her life right here in the Comox Valley. Whenever we'd go away, she would always say to me on our return, "Martin, it's so good to be home." And she worked tirelessly on the hospital board, the Philbig Lodge Board and was loved and respected by her fellow directors. Ben and I recently had a wonderful meeting with Chris Kelsey, the chair of the hospital board. He spoke so highly of her, and his appreciation of her service and character was obvious as he spoke through his tears. She received the Citizen of the Year award one year, and she heartily deserved it. Over the years, she was involved in helping 2 refugee families here settle here, and was involved with a 3rd family when she died on Christmas Eve. Barn, it's wonderful to see you. Where's Barn? I don't want to embarrass you, but anyway, I almost broke down when I saw Barn True come through the door, because he was the first family that we helped get here from Vietnam. And his wonderful son Ton is with him today. So now that I have another moment, let me tell you that Cynthia loved Jesus. As a young teen in Wales, she would often call into St. Michael's, her home church, and she would pray for a short time on her way to school. She always felt close to God. When we came to Canada, she began attending St. John the Divine in Courtenay, and then we moved over the bridge to the Comox side, and wonderful St. Peter's became our church home for over 20 years. Cynthia served on the parish council, she sang in the choir, and loved being a member of the congregation. She loved it when the prayer and praise evenings were held in our home, as you've heard Mary Jean say, and she loved the relationships that were built and have remained until her death. Later, Cynthia helped to run church services at Berwick Retirement Community, and she loved the older brothers and sisters that she made there. Right, Margaret? Cynthia trusted Ben, Tim, our family, our friends, and me to organize this service. She only wanted 2 things to happen today. First, she wanted Jesus to be honored. And through the words of Lawrence, the scriptures we've heard, the hymns we've sung, we've tried to do that. Secondly, she wanted no communion to be served, so that everyone would feel included and no one excluded. And to me, that exemplifies the way that Cynthia was always so considerate of others. Well, now that I have a final moment, last page, let me say, Cynthia, my love, today we hope we have honored you, for you so deserve to be honored. The backs of our shirts the backs of our shirts list the fruit of the Holy Spirit, which should be present in the lives of all Christians. They are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Well, Cynthia, my love, you exemplified every one of them. In John's Gospel it says, and you've heard this before, my Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? Cynthia, I trust that you have your room all sorted out. And when you have a moment, I would love it if you would clear a space for me to be with you again, not just now, but sometime in the days to come. My dear friends, you certainly have honored Cynthia with your presence here today, and on her behalf, I thank you all so much for coming.
Good afternoon. I want to begin today by saying how nice it is to see all of you who loved and were loved by my mom. Love is one thing that mom had an endless supply of. As you know, when I was a kid, I was very sick. The doctors went as far as to tell Mom and Dad to prepare for the fact that I may not make it. Can't read with them on. I can't read with them off. I know now that the love that Mom had for me and her faith in God was a deciding factor in me being here today. Mom was the kind of person who, in facing adversity, turned to God and left all things in his hands. Mom was also so good to us growing up. She loved us unconditionally. Whenever Ben or I landed ourselves in trouble, although she was angry with us, she always was fair in her punishment and always quick to forgive. Mom's love for Dad was a wonderful example of what a life filled with love should be. The years they shared together from a young age were also a shining example of what a marriage built on love and trust. I remember in college doing an essay on relationships. One of the topics was how do people deal with stress and divorce. At one point, I was struggling with this idea as I had no experience with it. And there was very little or no stress in our family. Either that or Mom did a good job of hiding it from us. I went to the instructor and I said that we had very little stress or no divorce in our family. The instructor, Denise Hammersley, who happened to know Mom and Dad, said to me, "Your family is one of the few families today that can actually say that." I know my parents' relationship wasn't perfect, but their love for each other was unconditional. They weren't just partners in marriage. They had a friendship that began in their early teens and stood the test of time. Mom took joy in a lot of things. One of those things was travel. When I was in grade 8 and Ben was in grade 10, Mom and Dad took us on a round-the-world trip for 6 months. We did our schooling in the evenings and learned about different cultures and customs in the countries we visited. And I can safely say that traveling during that time fueled my love for travel as well. We did many trips after that with Mom and Dad, but that one trip was a definite highlight of my life. I always loved how outgoing Mom was to the new people that joined the church, having them over for lunch or coffee or tea. Mom was such a giving person of her time. The countless people she helped in her job as counselor overflowed from the schools that she worked in into the community. Mom also had a quiet side to her. Many times I would drop into her house for a visit, and it was almost like there wasn't somebody there. It was as quiet as a library. Mom would be sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, working on a jigsaw puzzle or doing a Sudoku puzzle. She loved anything to do with puzzles. One day you would walk in and you would see the framework done on the table. The following day you would drop in and the entire jigsaw puzzle would be nearing completion. I could never do puzzles. My mom was one of the most patient and kind people I ever knew. Thinking back to the times spent in hospital, often we would have to wait and wait to see a doctor to get results of some kind of blood test. Very rarely did she ever get frustrated or impatient. 2 years ago, when I was sick, having to go for kidney dialysis and other treatments, Mom's patience was incredible. A lot of parents would have been up in arms waiting for their children to get that medical attention they needed. But her understanding of the fact that the doctors and nurses were doing everything they could to keep me going until a new heart arrived or became available was amazing. Mom spent hours at the hospital sitting by my bed while I rested, reading to me or playing Scrabble or some other game. Just being there for me during those hours of uncertainty and wondering when and if a heart would arrive was incredibly trying and stressful. Yet she took it all in stride. My younger years, I had a horrible habit of always leaving my assignments in school till the last minute. Mom was always the one to sit with me patiently into the night, encouraging me and helping me to get them done. I know that there were other things that she would much rather have been doing, but Mom always put myself and everyone else first. Colin touched on this earlier, but I'm going to tell my side of the story now. There's a funny story from when I was a little boy, thank you, that I'd like to share. Colin and I spent hours on our bikes together. We were virtually inseparable. It helped that we were the only kids on the street, along with our two brothers. Colin and I were out one afternoon doing jumps and skids on our bikes, having a great time. As we were speeding down the street, Colin's front wheel on his bike came loose and fell off. Unfortunately for him, he was pitched over the handlebars, and the first thing to make contact with the dirt road was his chin. As it happened, Mom was out in the front yard and heard the yelling and screaming and came running. She helped Colin into the house, where she proceeded to administer first aid in the form of paper towels and a healthy dose of hydrogen peroxide. To this day, and it's obvious, I don't think Colin has ever forgotten this painful day. You need that one. Mom was overjoyed when Andy and I told her the news that we were expecting our first child. Charlotte came into this world, and Mom was so very helpful in those early years and continued to be an excellent grandma to Oliver and Charlotte. The first years when Charlotte was still little, Mom came to us and suggested that Andy and I let Mom take Charlotte overnight every so often. She stressed that spending time with our kids was very important, but it was also important for us to continue to develop our relationship as husband and wife. So we had date nights. We would drop off Charlotte with Mom and Dad, and we'd go out for dinner, or we would go to a movie or something. The dates were a welcome relief from our parenting duties. Charlotte and Oliver, of course, were both excellent babies. Later on, as our kids got older, Mom and Dad introduced them to many different games. Some nights the kids would go up and play cards, or one of Dad's board games that he got from the Philburg Festival. The kids loved to play with Grandma and loved spending time with her. It's with a heavy heart that I think of the things that Mom will miss out on in the years to come, and in the lives of our two beautiful kids. But I know she's watching from heaven. Mom, I miss you and I love you. Thank you.
What they said. So first off, I just want to thank everyone for being here today, despite the inclement weather, and the fact that we picked a day for a memorial on the worst possible day of the year. It's Super Bowl. So to echo Dad's comments, I'd like to say that we really appreciate your support for the family. I'd like to also mention a quick thank you to all those who helped set up for the event. Ian and Judy for the music, Lawrence for his remarks, Mary Jean for her great comments, and Stace, I'm thinking of you today. Lastly, Tim, Dad, and I want to thank Colin for being the MC. It's not an easy task when someone has so many ties to the person that's being remembered. Hi, Mom. I'm going to practice this quite a few times. But I was sitting in the hot tub last night looking out through the clear cold at millions of stars sparkling off in the distance. I was thinking of you. I was missing you. What are you doing now? Are you working on one of those infuriating cryptic crosswords you like so much? Are you having your 7th cup of tea with the good doctor, St. Luke? What about belting out a rousing hymn with that pure soprano voice of yours? Are you out there, Mom? Are you watching me sob quietly in the tub? You can't start crying. It's going to be impossible. I can see the stars twinkling. One in particular is a bit brighter. I'm doing okay, Mom. I have good hours and bad, good days and bad. Sometimes I can see you. I have a vivid memory of your face and a good time and a good experience. Other times I can't see your face. I can't formulate a memory. I'm in my office writing this letter to you. I'm in a flood of tears, so much so that I've tried to live stream Sean Spicer's daily press briefing just to distract me enough to finish writing. Now that's desperate. It's a brilliant, beautiful blue sky day, cold and crisp, the kind of day you loved when you used to take Tim's dog for a walk. You cared for that dog like it was your own, just as you cared for everyone in your life, always putting others first, always willing to help physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So here I am, trying to cram a lifetime of memories and feelings into a 6-minute speech. It's an impossible task. It's funny how you instilled in me a love of words, and now that I have to write, I can't find the right ones. One of my favorite aphorisms is from Socrates. Wisdom begins in wonder, and you and Dad helped to instill that love of learning in me. He taught us the world was a big place, and that other cultures, religions, races, and preferences were to be cherished and accepted. You exposed us to so many different places and people through your love of travel. We discovered history all over Europe. We dodged bandits in India. True story. We husked coconuts in Fiji. We saw mud boiling in New Zealand. We backpacked through Southeast Asia. We watched in amazement the migration across the Serengeti. And we ate strange and unusual food in South Korea. It was a wonderful childhood. Not all were so fortunate. Remember those many times we had young people in trouble stay with us when Tim and I were kids. No questions asked, absolutely. They can stay with us for as long as it takes. Or how about helping out our refugee friends from Vietnam, from the Balkans, from Eritrea? Now that's an immigration policy to be proud of. In the modern vernacular, hashtag love Trump's hate. Mom, that was loud. Mom, you didn't know because I was young and I didn't know how to voice it, but I saw the burden you carried when you came home from your counseling job, exhausted after listening to a young girl who'd been abused by her father. A young boy so sad because his mother abandoned him to the care of his grandparents. A community devastated by the loss of a family in a fire. You bore these burdens alone, unable to share the details because of confidentiality rules. You bore them with grace, and you never brought those troubles into our home. Speaking of home, our house was a home, always full of love, smiles, and food. You and Dad provided a great place to grow up. Colin and Troy spent hours with us building fawn forts. I'll talk about that after the ceremony if you like. Riding bikes at the paved place, scoring road hockey goals, enjoying endless soccer games on the back lawn. Later, Ben, Simon, Rick, Doug, John, Jason, many others enjoyed watching NBA playoff games and playing hours of 3-on-3 in the driveway. The welcome extended to the youth of the community as you ran the youth group for years. At times we might have thought it was a silly idea, but looking back, it sure kept us out of trouble. And for that, there are a lot of people grateful here today. Mom, you were a really good cheerleader. The cries of, "And again, boys," echoed across the soccer pitch when we were young, moving to the basketball court when we were older as we competed in various games and tournaments. Your cheerleading continued in my various businesses. You were always willing to encourage our ventures and offered your support and advice in a variety of circumstances. You encouraged me to take risks, and most recently, you loved the idea of Craig, Chris, Adam, and I opening the tap house, although you did say you wanted to make sure we had a bottle of sherry on hand at all times. You supported Jose and I through our house building process, and its completion was something you really wanted to be part of. You'll be there in spirit, Mom. Speaking of Jose, you loved her like a daughter. In fact, sometimes the way you talked about her to me made me think she was your child, not me. You really wanted us to be happy and healthy, Mom, and we're doing our best. I just have to practice pushing the supper table away a little more often. You and Dad set a great example for us to follow. You loved each other, sometimes more, sometimes less, but always constantly. You had arguments, but the bottom line in your relationship was that no issue was going to divide you. 60-odd years of being together has shown us how a long-term relationship is work, but it's work well worth it. Health was a constant theme in our family, Mom. And while you had your own health issues through your life, you once again put Dad, Tim, and I first. You nursed Dad and I through our many trials, broken collarbones, knee surgeries, ankles, fingers, but none of our troubles compared to what Tim had borne through his life. You were his champion, his advocate, and his greatest source of encouragement. From birth through surgeries at 3 weeks, multiple procedures, 2 heart transplants, and numerous other medical fights, he's healthy now, Mom, and he's doing well. He's a great husband to Andy and father to Charlotte and Oliver. These lovely little redheads. They're the lights of your life. They'll have great memories of you as they grow up, move into careers, and have families of their own. Like you said when you found out about your diagnosis, you'll be there through their lives. We know you were there, as will Charlotte and Oliver. We won't let you forget them. Games nights with them, camping trips, or just quick visits were all things you looked forward to, and time spent with those kids helped energize you, even when you were down. In the last few years, you were tired. You were quiet and a little withdrawn, and I understand why. You were exhausted. A lifetime of giving, a lifetime of listening, a lifetime of caring for others had drained you. You faced your diagnosis with courage and even a little humor. At one point, you turned to me and said, "Being a diabetic with a terminal diagnosis isn't that bad. You can eat whatever you want." You showed us in your final weeks how to die with grace and peace, and that was your final gift to us. Your acceptance of your diagnosis allowed us to mourn with sadness, but without anger and denial. I can't thank you enough for being the mom you were and are. You were tough, fair, understanding, encouraging, kind, and loving. You were selfless. You were a best friend. You were my mom, and I'll always love you. I'll see you soon, Mom, but not too soon.
So you have done a beautiful job of honoring a remarkable woman. That was one of our desires, one of the family's desires, to do that well, and it's been done beautifully. You have to listen to me because my assignment comes from Cynthia. You won't be surprised when I would summarize what we've heard already this afternoon, that Cynthia was a godly woman. That her example would be, her life would be an example or a model of what happens when you live your life in keeping with what the Bible says. It's a picture for me that is characterized or summarized with this incredible strength and confidence that we saw in Cynthia, particularly for me, just in these final months. Wanda and I just moved here to pastor a church in the valley, and we, together with Martin and Cynthia, were ministering to this small group that meets in Berwick Sunday mornings. And my picture of Cynthia is of her standing at the back of our meeting area, ready to be in communion with her God. And what was remarkable was that even when Cynthia gave me this assignment, I thought, well, I'll make some notes so if she wants to talk about this, she can talk about this. We got lots of time. We didn't have lots of time. And yet her strength in the face of her diagnosis was remarkable. You saw that. It was a strength that stood so consistently that it was enough to make you say, is this right? How can it be that strong? And what Cynthia asked me to do was to make sure you understood what you were seeing. That Cynthia wanted you to understand, not only to honor and celebrate the beauty of who she was and what she did, but that you would understand the foundation and the source of that life. That if we're not careful, we would look at Cynthia's life and say, well, she's sure a lot better than I was. There's just a few good ones, and I'm not one of those. Cynthia wouldn't be happy with that picture. Cynthia would want you to understand that the life that you saw was an expression of the life that she had inside of her with her God. That it was her faith that was the foundation for these things. And so when we say faith, we generally would mean that set of beliefs and things we understand about how the world works, who we are, who God is, where the church fits into that, what happens when a person dies. You might chalk it up to a set of rituals or particular disciplines that Cynthia had in her life, or maybe some pleasant-sounding words that we read out of an ancient book at times like this. But if it's those things, those general kinds of things, I suspect that they don't actually meet the criteria. That is, if those were the things that gave Cynthia strength, are those things strong enough? And I would suggest to you they're not. Because they're ideas that we hold in our head, and we think that God is like this. But then when you have a diagnosis like Cynthia's, when you have a journey that's cut short like Cynthia's, that idea isn't strong enough. It starts to crumble under that. But it didn't for Cynthia, did it? In fact, in some ways, what was inside of her got stronger, not weaker. Because if we understand Christianity and faith correctly, we must understand that faith is not primarily about hoping for the best or about a set of supportive ideas and things that we talk about when things get tough. It's sort of a good hope message that we say, well, things are better than they seem, even though they seem really tough right now. That's not what faith is. That's not what Cynthia had. What we see in Cynthia's life, a beautiful and remarkable life, a life that impacted my life even in just a few weeks. What we are seeing is someone who, by faith, had a relationship with Jesus. Her faith meant that she trusted him. She could speak to him, and he could speak to her. She was committed to the things that he was committed to. And she was reliant on him. It wasn't a set of ideas. It was a way she lived her life that said, I can totally trust and depend upon Jesus. He is my strength. He is my foundation. He is my refuge in the most difficult of times. And she was very clear with me that she wanted you to understand. That she wanted you to understand that. Because for many of us, or for some of us perhaps, it's not that faith and church and those ideas aren't part of our lives. They just haven't been particularly relevant. They haven't always worked. That would have been my own experience. But it's partly because we talked about ideas instead of a person. And what Cynthia had was a relationship with Jesus Christ. It was a relationship similar to the relationship you had with her. It gave her strength and stability even in the most difficult of times. And we've heard about some of those times today. And so that's what she would invite you to consider this afternoon. That the foundation for her was Jesus. Because it was Jesus that she spoke to and looked to when she received her diagnosis and her prognosis. It was Jesus who she committed and handed over her family to as she faced her departure. It's Jesus who she said, Jesus, would you care for my friends and those people that were most dear to her? It was Jesus who gave her comfort in the face of dreams and desires that she would not have time to pursue. And it was Jesus who carried her in this remarkably too quick transition from this life to a next life. It was Jesus that she heard speaking peace and strength and comfort to her heart. And you saw actions that came out of that heart. And so this afternoon, Jesus would also speak to us. And he would speak these things directly to us face to face as we would turn to him with faith, with some expectation that he might have something to say to us. Even if that faith is really shaky and uncertain, we could look to him today and he would say, I am here. I will never leave you or forsake you. He would say, I have come to bring light into a place of darkness. He would say, I have come to help you understand who God is and his remarkable, insistent, jealous love for you. It would be Jesus that would speak to you and say, I know the deep places of your heart, the places of your heart that are confused and not happy, that don't know how to put this picture together. And it would be Jesus that would say to us, I will bring blessing even out of tragedy and difficulty and darkness. What Cynthia had and who Cynthia was remarkably unique and beautiful. But it is not a one-off. It's not something that we should think is extraordinary and only happens once in a lifetime. It's the result of standing a life consistently and trustfully on who Jesus is and what he says to us. Amen.
In closing, Cynthia has left a legacy of service and love. She's lived her entire life setting an example of what a truly good person should be. As a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. I've done a lot of reflection and had a lot of emotional times lately, a few with Ben and a few by myself. I can't help but to conclude how amazing it is that a person so unassuming, so gracious and humble can have this kind of effect in a snowstorm. The title of this service is A Life Well Lived, and I couldn't agree more. I'd like to end with an excerpt from a letter that I wrote to Cynthia in early December, and I think it applies to a lot of us. I want to thank you for these fond memories and for the positive contributions you've made in my life. When Ben and I have been chatting of late, he told me that you're handling this adversity with grace and dignity. This made me emotional, but it was not at all surprising. You are someone who has lived their life exemplifying what is important to you, your family and helping others. So it was not a shock to me that you're in a position without any regret. I so admire that and can only hope to look back on my life with similar perspective and to be so brave and dignified. I want to thank you for the example you've set for those around you. You have consistently given your best to others, and that is your legacy. I feel very fortunate to be a part of that. On behalf of the family, once again, thank you all so much for coming this afternoon. Don't forget to drop your cards in the baskets in the foyer, and please drive safely.